good now? Okay. Hi, I'm back. Good evening. I'm Mark Berry. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation, and we're here this evening to review what FHI Studios has been doing for the last 12 months or so, looking at opportunities to improve connectivity throughout Groton. Some of you may remember 2 years ago we did a recreational needs assessment. We updated our recreation master plan, and one of the greatest needs identified was improved connectivity. So the project that FHI has been working on aligns perfectly with what the needs of the community said, and they've done extensive work, as I said, over the last 12 months to come up with a plan, and this evening they're going to be presenting that plan, and there will be an opportunity for you all to provide comment. The plan, the next step in this process will be FHI will take the comments that are made, incorporate that into a final plan, and that plan will be presented to the Town Council on March 11th. For their approval, and with this new updated bike and pedestrian master plan, it will put us, the town of Groton, in a very good position to seek federal funds to begin making improvements across Groton. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Francisco so that he can begin the presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. And let me try to advance the slide. All right, if we could go back to presentation mode, just a second. Okay, it looks good on this side. You got a different screen there, but we're good here.
Yeah, the only problem is this is what I'm seeing online, and we just want to see this.
Right.
I need it to see just this. I'm so sorry. I don't know why it's high present. There we go.
Okay, and we're still good here too. All right. Well, first of all, as Mark said, thanks for coming out this evening on a winter evening to talk about the future of this community as we think about walking through town, across town, and bicycling in town, using a wheelchair, and accommodating users other than those driving in vehicles. So our agenda this evening is, at first, I'll refresh your memories on who we are as a firm and our role in this project. We'll talk about the community engagement work that we've done and how that's informed the plan itself. We'll briefly go over existing conditions and the work we did in preparation for the plan, for the plan's recommendation. We'll review at a very high level, because we've got an entire town to cover in one evening. We'll review the plan's recommendations, the types of recommendations that we'll be making. And then I also want to talk about some of our other efforts, including conceptual plans. So we've produced a town-wide, or we are producing a town-wide bicycle facilities and pedestrian and trails plan. But we've also been tasked with taking a look at 5 corridors through the town and developing more detailed plans that could be used, as Mark had mentioned, in the pursuit of grants to get funding to build out those projects. So we've done that for 5 corridors, including Route 1, which we divided up into 3 segments, so I'll talk about that. We've also have a handful of demonstration projects. One of them we've already conducted. It was a traffic garden at the former Claude School, so we'll touch upon that. We've also been involved with the town in the Crosstown Greenway and developing branding and signage and wayfinding for that greenway. And it's an exciting project. It's an extension of this master plan work. And so I'll give you an update on that. And then we'll talk about our next steps in the process. As Mark had mentioned, we'll be before council next month, and we're in the process of finalizing the plan. And as soon as that plan is available, we'll make it available on the town's website and to all of you. All right, so first of all, our team, FHI Studio, is a planning firm. We're located in Hartford. I'm joined by Nicole, who you probably spoke with. She's sitting at the back of the room. Nicole, myself, Rory Jacobson, and other members of our team who you may have met at the workshop we conducted last year. We've been involved in this project for close to a year now, and we do a lot of this type of work across the state and really throughout New England. So we bring considerable amount of expertise in multimodal planning, complete streets planning, and bicycle and pedestrian planning, including work with Connecticut DOT. And many of your roadways are state highways, and so we're very familiar with some of the constraints of working on a state facility and making recommendations for a state highway. Our firm worked with Connecticut DOT to develop their bicycle and pedestrian, what they call complete streets, planning criteria that they use on projects. So we're familiar with it because we help them develop it. And that's basically their process and their standards for how to include bicycle and pedestrian facilities on state highways. So we come to this plan with an understanding of the challenges of a state highway, of planning, designing, and building a facility on a state highway. And I think everything that we've recommended thus far as part of this plan is something that I think is realistic to be built out on a Connecticut state roadway, okay, or along it. All right, so the purpose of this plan, and the town does a lot of planning. It's one of the town's responsibility is to plan for infrastructure and to plan for services that it provides to its residents. Our plan has a very specific focus and purpose, and that is to improve bicycling and pedestrian facilities and conditions for people in town. That's the focus of our efforts. Now, we do that within the context of a transportation system that needs to accommodate all sorts of users. It needs to accommodate drivers, obviously. It needs to accommodate school buses. It needs to accommodate delivery vehicles. It needs to accommodate freight and truck traffic, public safety vehicles. So all the recommendations we make are sensitive to the fact that the facilities throughout town need to accommodate a wide range of users. And we don't want to make recommendations or have the town invest in a facility that improves conditions for one user, but really adversely impacts conditions for other users. So that's a very careful balance that we need to achieve, is to make things better for everyone without making things worse for someone. Which isn't to say that some of these recommendations won't have some impacts. Our challenge is to make sure those impacts aren't adverse and they don't challenge or constrain everyone's ability to move across town. Okay. So our project started in early 2024. It began with a lot of existing conditions work, which involves us doing a lot of mapping and driving through town, taking a look at things, taking pictures, collecting data from DOT, speed data, volume data, crash data, et cetera. We then, last September, we came to you in a workshop where we had some ideas on what the plan should cover, some of the corridors it should focus on, and you provided us, and I see some familiar faces, provided us with some guidance on that. And so we took that back to our office, and that has informed the work that we have since done. As part of this process, we also conducted a survey, and we had very good participation on that. And that also helped us understand people's needs a lot better across the town. And since then, we've been hard at work developing the plan itself. So the plan will be comprised of a lot of different elements. First of all the existing conditions work will be summarized in the plan. It will be a useful resource to understand what areas of town where you have concentration of crashes, particularly those involving bicyclists and pedestrians. Which roads carry the heaviest volume? Where are the highest speeds found? Where is the greatest potential demand for bicycling and walking based upon density of locations and other factors as well? So all of that will be put into one plan. It will also include what we've developed thus far, and we've made a draft available to the town they're currently reviewing along with the committee, is a toolbox that has planning and design guidance for all types of bicycle and pedestrian facilities, whether it be a crosswalk, a sidewalk, a bike path, a bike lane. How wide does it need to be? What kind of pavement markings? What kind of signage? How do you treat intersections and crossings? In what conditions do you use it? What kind of barriers do you need? So we put all that guidance in one place, and that's based upon national and state standards. And currently, as I mentioned, we also had developed concept plans. I'll talk about those a little bit more. And we're really in the process of taking all that and packaging it together into a document that helps to tell the story about why this is an important issue. And finally, what the approach should be. Which of these improvements are a priority? Which roads are a priority? So we're developing implementation recommendations that identifies high priority items, lower priority items, and finally putting a dollar sign, a planning level estimate to all of that so the town can plan. Okay, like that, okay, sure. All right, so I'll walk you through it. Community engagement. Our workshop was incredibly productive. We held it right here. We learned a lot from it. We had a very good turnout. And we really did change, alter, add routes, change the type of facilities that we were working on or had planned on recommending based upon the feedback you provided us. So thanks again to those who attended here in September. The online survey, we had 624 responses, and a lot of responses to open-ended questions where people provided us, detailed descriptions about what their concerns are, what their needs are, and that's been very informative to our work as well. And just to give you a sense as to the type of feedback that we had, we asked people, what prevents you from bicycling more along roads in Groton? And the top choices were there are too few bike routes or bike lanes. There just aren't facilities for me. That's one of the top choice. Next to that is too much traffic, poor maintenance, and a general concern about safety, and mostly because there isn't a dedicated place to bicycle. We asked about problems people encounter, and once again, consistent type of response. Lack of bike lanes, drivers pass too closely, and of course that happens when there's not a bike lane to ride in. When we asked about trails and bicycle and pedestrian connections, people identified the top priorities for improvements are improved connections between bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So you have sidewalks through town, but they're not necessarily continuous. You have trails in town, but they're isolated to the open space that they're in. You do have some segments of pathways, but they're not continuous across town. And people really want to see all of that better connected so you have options and you can go further with more choices. We also asked about walking and what type of improvements would you need to encourage walking. And very obviously, more sidewalks, right? That's the key issue, is lack of sidewalks. And then also, many of the sidewalks are very close to the edge of the road, and people would prefer a little more separation. So that's a very short summary, a few of the responses we received. We've got the full summary of survey results. I believe it's currently available on the website, and so those are available. If you want to explore in more detail the rest of the questions and the responses to that, that is currently available, and we'll also provide a summary in the plan. In the course of our work, one of the first things that we do is we review all the planning work that's been done to date. So we're not starting from scratch. There's been a lot of work done over the past decade and more thinking about how to walk or bicycle across town and across the region as well. So we've reviewed regional plans and studies and town plans and studies and have taken those recommendations and have carried them forward into the plan. So the plan that we're developing builds upon the work that has come prior. And a case in point, there was in 2005, there was Bike, Ped, and Trails Master Plan. And this plan is substantially more detailed than that effort, but that was a first real effort to document the needs and make some basic recommendations. And then there are other regional concepts like the Eastern Shoreline Path, of which there are elements here in Groton that we are recommending providing facilities for to accommodate that route. So as we put it all on the map, we see a lot of different facilities that have been recommended, planned. Some of these are just ideas, others are further in development, and that includes the Tri-Town Trail Master Plan. The COG also did a bicycle and pedestrian plan recommending routes. The bicycle and pedestrian plan for City Groton has their own plan. The Groton Bike Study, the Crosstown Greenway, which we've been actively involved with. And so we've mapped all of that, and that was really the first step in identifying where our network is and what needs to be connected and what roads should accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians. We mapped out all your existing facilities, of which there aren't many when you take a look at bike facilities or facilities that can accommodate bicyclists. A lot of your facilities are bike ped, they're both walkers and cyclists. We've got along Route 12 connecting to the sub-base. We've got a really nice length of pathway, and that accommodates bicyclists and pedestrians. We've got a segment along Route 1, close to Pequannock Plains Park and approaching the middle school. We've got the trolley trail here, a little tiny segment on Gold Star Highway. It's really more of a wide sidewalk than anything. And then a few bike lanes, Thomas Road and 215. But these things are scattered, and they're, at best, they're a mile long, quarter mile, half mile. And so that really speaks to a need to connect, to infill and connect all of these. And we see the same when we take a look at your sidewalks, and I realize you have a hard time seeing from back there on a small screen, so I'll try to describe it. You do have sidewalks across town, but the network is very fragmented. Sidewalks on one side of the road, but not the other. Sidewalks, gaps for one property, several properties for a mile, whatever it may be. So we've also provided recommendations for strategically connecting this sidewalk network so it's possible to walk without having to walk in the road or cross the road to get to the sidewalk on the other side. Early in our work, we try to understand where the busy roads are. Busy roads are really challenging for obvious reasons. They carry a lot of traffic, the speeds are often higher, and it's difficult for pedestrians to walk in the road with that kind of traffic, for bicyclists to walk in the road, to cycle in the road with that kind of traffic. So we know that these roadways here are going to be challenging. These are principal arterial and minor arterial and collector roads, many of them state highways. And fortunately, we have a lot of data available to us for many of these roads, unlike local roads for which we might not have speed or volume data. So we can understand what the needs are. The recommendations that we make are based upon multiple factors, but two very important factors are traffic volume and speed. Traffic volume makes it very uncomfortable for someone to walk in a road or bicycle in a road with a lot of vehicles for obvious reasons. It also, just by factor of numbers, increases the probability of a crash occurring because there's more vehicles. And then speed being the other factor. And speed is really the primary safety factor. Lower speed roadways, even those that carry a lot of cars, if they're very low speed, those tend to be safer roadways than higher speed roadways that carry less traffic. So these are the conditions that we're aware of, and we know we can't really change traffic volume. And you can change speed a little bit with certain improvements, but we're very limited on our state highways. We can't do aggressive traffic calming. And so we don't have a lot of control over speed either. And periodic enforcement can help, but that's only temporary. Okay, so I talked about volume, and I'll do my best to keep the mic up here. Your heaviest traffic volumes are, and this should come as no surprise to people, It's on Route 12. Route 1, that's the orange, red, and orange lines here. Route 1, 117, right by here, between Route 1 and 95. And as I said earlier, Gold Star Highway, the western part of it. The green and blue lines are lower in volume. Not like a neighborhood road lower, but a little lower. So on these corridors, we know that generally speaking, anything red or orange, we want to keep bicyclists and pedestrians off the road. So we need improved sidewalks, and provide a facility that's off the road. And then the speeds, these are real challenges. The darker the line is, the higher the speed. So Gold Star Highway has some of the highest speeds in town, above 45 miles per hour. Segments of Route 1 of 215. So this is also a challenge. Even 117, from the length of 117, the speeds are pretty high on this corridor right here. We took a look at crash activity, and what we see is that crashes are really highly concentrated along Route 12 near the I-95 interchange and along Route 1. And crashes occur, generally speaking, they follow this pattern. They occur where you have the most traffic, and they occur where you have the most intersections, and that's exactly what we see. So moving pedestrians and bicyclists safely through intersections is also a very important part of this work. The road leading up to the intersection is important to provide that facility, whether it's a sidewalk or whatever it is. But then you need to provide a safe crossing. And in the toolbox we've developed a lot of guidance on how to provide safe crossings for both bicyclists and pedestrians. Finally, we take all that and we merge it together into what we call a stress analysis. So we take the volume and we layer on top the speed and then the crash history, and we identify roads that we expect would be the highest stress for a user, whether a bicyclist or a pedestrian, if they were in the road. And what we see is that actually the stress actually shifts out to the east a little bit, and that's because of the higher speeds up here. And that's what it looks like with the crash data layered on it. We did also inventory bicyclists and pedestrian crashes, and we had a very heavy concentration of those along Route 1 and 12 and near 95 and at some other major intersections like at 117 and Route 1. Okay, and finally, I talked about this a little earlier, but we also want to be able to prioritize our recommendations. So where would you start? What areas have the highest priority for providing improvements? And we do that, we did a demand analysis, and we call this a heat map because the areas in red suggest the highest demand. And so we do a demand analysis by mapping all the schools, any universities or higher education, parks and playground, town facilities like this facility right here, parks, major employment locations, high density housing, retail corridors. We map all those, assign values to them, and we run it through the machine we use GIS it's called, and it creates mapping for us. So all the areas in red and pink and orange are the areas where we expect there to be the most activity of people moving around, people either originating from a place or trying to arrive at a place. And so that's for all kinds of trips, which also means these places are likely to generate the most demand for bicyclists and pedestrian trips too. So this factors not only into the recommendations we made about should we provide new sidewalks or new bike paths here, but also how much of a priority is it? And the areas in red are going to be, in our implementation recommendations, are going to be identified as higher priority for that reason. Okay? And that's, if you layer on population density, that's those dots, community resources, schools, retail corridors, employment locations. You could see how it all just layers on, and that's how you develop the heat map. As I mentioned earlier, we took a look at your sidewalks, and the red lines indicate where you have the biggest gaps or deficiencies. There's very little to no sidewalk network. A thick red line, there aren't sidewalks on either side of the road. A thinner red line, there's sidewalks only on one side of the road. And so we've mapped all that out and are developing recommendations for that as well. Okay, so let's talk about the types of facilities that we're recommending. And that starts with the guidance document. So there's a lot of federal and state level guidance as to how to recommend these facilities, how to plan them, how to design and how to build them. And we review all of those, and so the recommendations we're providing to the town are based upon all of this work. And some of this work is very recent. Some of these documents have come out in the past year or have been updated in the past year. And for bicycle facilities, we're recommending a range of different facility types for all the different conditions. I'll go through those one by one. First is a shared roadway. So shared roadways are really only appropriate to lower volume, lower speed roadways where people are probably already walking or bicycling in the road fairly comfortably because the speeds and the volumes are lower. And this facility is really just marked by pavement markings that look like this and occasional signage. The purpose of it is to direct bicyclists towards roads that are more suitable based upon traffic conditions, and to make drivers more aware to expect the presence of bicyclists. And so that's the value of these facilities. They are low cost, and so you can build out a lot of network like this, but they have to be used very strategically, only in conditions that are appropriate. You would never put this pavement marking on Route 1 and put up a couple signs that say shared roadway or share the road or bikes and road and call it a day. It's not the appropriate condition. But there are a lot of roads in town where this type of facility is appropriate, and so we've provided recommendations to that effect. Next are bike lanes. And so you do have some examples of bike lanes in town. That's basically where you have a shoulder on the roadway and space for the bicyclists at the edge of the roadway. And you provide signage and pavement markings, and that way you can separate out the traffic. Now, we have to be very careful about the use of these as well. The roadway needs to be wide enough. There needs to be room for trucks to pass a bicyclist safely with 3 feet between them, which is the state law. And so these facilities can be on kind of more moderate level traffic volume and speed roadways, but this alone still is not suitable for a corridor like Route 1, right? The traffic conditions are just too intense for this type of facility. But in this context, it works okay. Next are buffered bike lanes. So this is where if you have a little more space on the roadway, you create more separation between bikes and traffic by adding in a pavement marked buffer, and you can reinforce this with traffic posts, PVC traffic delineators that are designed for in-road use. The advantage of this is that 3 feet, and this can vary in width, that state mandated 3 feet is designed, is built into the roadway. The pavement markings are there, so you're almost guaranteed that traffic stays here and bicyclists stay here, and you build in that separation. You have to have space, though, on the roadway for this. Or if you widen the roadway to accommodate it, it's very costly, right? So there are limited conditions. We have recommended this type of facility, but there are limited conditions in town where you have the space to accommodate something like this. The next recommended facility, which this is off Route 12, I believe, and this leads up to the subbase, is what we call a side path. And a side path is like a sidewalk that is designed for both bicyclists and pedestrians. So a sidewalk, which could be 4 or 5, 6 feet wide, is a lot narrower than a side path, which is about 10 feet wide or more. And side paths may or may not be asphalt or concrete, but the point is both the bicyclists and the pedestrians share a facility that is off the road. And so side paths are a tool that we think is very appropriate for a lot of conditions here in Groton. We've recommended side paths along a lot of the corridors. And this is not without its challenges. First of all, to construct, it's a costly facility. The intersections and driveways have to be treated appropriately so as not to create a hazard. You have to have good sight lines at driveways and intersections. But in many cases, such as along Route 12 or any other heavy volume roadway, the safest, most comfortable option for bicyclists and pedestrians is to get them off of the roadway. And because your pedestrian rates, if you want to call it that, and bicycling rate here in town is relatively low, when you get into the center of Mystic and some other areas, you do have a lot more pedestrians. But as you get further away from some of those retail and commercial areas, you have very few pedestrians, and you actually have very few bicyclists. So it's possible for them to share a facility without there being a lot of conflict. Okay. And then finally, shared use pathways, the trolley trail is an example. And that's really a side path and a shared use pathway, the same type of facility. A shared use path tends to wander away from the road. A side path follows the edge of the road like a sidewalk. And so the trolley trail is a great example, and we've recommended creating some new connections up to the trolley trail, by example, along an easement, and expanding the use of these through town to better connect the trails and existing paths that you have. These facilities aren't all the same. Our goal, generally speaking, is this is a comparison of risk, stress, and comfort. Ideally, we want everything to be low stress, low risk in this quadrant here. In some cases, we might have a condition where it's high stress just because there's a lot of traffic, but the way we've designed it, it's low risk because we've separated out bicyclists and traffic, or pedestrians and traffic. What we definitely don't want is to be high stress and high risk. So we want to stay down here and not be up here. And that's our general approach. And so what we see is with these different facilities, they have different advantages with respect to that. A shared lane it doesn't need a lot of space, it has a lower cost, but it might not be as comfortable as a shared use pathway. And so there are trade-offs as we go across. Side paths and shared use paths tend to have higher cost and require more space, but they tend to be more comfortable because there's more separation from traffic. So we're always balancing that. And then finally, the types of facilities we recommend, as I said earlier, are really based upon traffic volume and speeds. And so this chart here is the approach that we've taken. It's in the plan, and it'll give you an idea as to why we might recommend a bike lane here, but a side path or a buffered bike lane on another corridor. We worked with Connecticut DOT to develop this criteria and this standard, and so that's what's currently being applied to state roadways as well. All right, let's talk about the recommendations. When you came in, you probably saw a couple maps. We have one for bike facilities, another one for sidewalk connections. And what we've recommended, as you can see on this map, are lots of lines connecting everywhere. Everything that's dashed means it's recommended by us. Everything that's solid means an existing facility. And we've got a network that covers the entire town and connects as best we could every single park, open space, school, neighborhood, and other destination in town with a range of facility types, including shared roadways, bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, side paths, and shared use pathways. So that's the network. We've got a lot of information behind all of these. We've inventoried each of these segments, and we've got a table that will let you know what the speed and volume conditions are there and how wide the right-of-way is, and very importantly, what the cost might be to build out that facility. And the same is true of sidewalks. And so we propose providing connections between all of those facilities. Now, the range of improvements we're talking about are, as you might imagine, are in the tens of millions. Yeah, right there. Yes, sir. The town's not going to be able to build this out in the next 5 years. This plan creates the opportunity to pursue grants and puts the town, as Mark said, in a very good position to pursue grants on a project-by-project basis. Additionally, the DOT now requires, whenever they improve a roadway, which includes resurfacing, drainage improvements, whatever it may be, they are required their own internal policy, which we worked with them to develop, is to ensure that they look at and identify what type of facilities should be provided for bicyclists and pedestrians, identify what the cost, and if it's feasible to include it in the project. And they really have to identify it as not being feasible for that improvement not to be included. Your plan would help really advance that, because the town could provide it whenever an improvement's being made, identifying what the recommendation is, and it's incumbent upon them to test the feasibility of it and potentially to finance it. All right, so that's the value of this effort. Okay, now we have something like 60 miles of improvements that we've recommended for bicyclists alone, not including sidewalks, in which case a lot of them run parallel. We were also scoped to take a look at 5 different corridors and take those to a level of design that would help us better understand the feasibility of making those improvements, specifically what type of improvements might be need to be made, what the property impacts might be, and what the cost would be. And so we've developed concepts for 3 different corridors with 5 different project areas. So Route 1, we've done all of Route 1, and that includes the western part, Route 12 and Route 1, middle part, Hamburger Hill, and the eastern part approaching Mystic and through Mystic. We've also done Route 117, North Road, and Route 215. So we've done schematic level design that looks like this. We've got, at least 20 of these sheets, maybe 30 of these sheets that look like this. So we identify the types of facilities that are there, where the curb is, where the property lines are, what the grades are, what the intersections look like, and then we show the recommended facility, in this case a side path here, approaching Route 1, connecting to the existing pathway that goes up towards Route 12. Potential driveway impacts and how to treat driveways, potential utility impacts, grading constraints, retaining walls needed, intersection improvements such as pedestrian crossing signals. So we've done that for all of those corridors, and we're developing cost estimates for that as well. We have done planning level cost estimates for all the facilities we've recommended across town. These will be more detailed and more accurate. And so these plans will be really advantageous for the town to work, and they're all state roadways, to work with DOT in starting to plan for and provide improvements along these corridors. Our goal along Route 1 is to keep bicyclists and pedestrians off the road and on a shared facility. And we've selected the side of the roadway that's most favorable based upon the conditions. There are still a lot of challenges in the form of driveways. We've generally favored the side of the road that has fewer driveways, but there are still driveways. So this is a long-term vision. It's nothing that would be built out over the next couple of years. It would need to get financed. It would need to go through a lot of design and coordination with property owners. There may be some easements required or sliver takings on properties, because many of the property lines come out into the state right away. So this is a big idea project. But Route 1 is the most important crosstown connection you have. 184 is another important crosstown connection, but you have very little population there and fewer destinations. Route 1 is really the heart. It connects everything, and it's very difficult to get across town, all the way across town on any other corridor without somehow landing on Route 1, even for a short segment. So it's an incredibly important corridor, and that's why it was included in this process. And for each of these corridors, and this is 215 as an example, we've developed recommendations that are appropriate to that specific corridor. On 215, fortunately, there's a lot of pavement on this particular segment on South Elm Street. The space is there, and so this is a perfect candidate for buffered bike lanes. And people, I'm sure, already ride or walk on that shoulder, and so that's a perfect space for an improvement, which would not require roadway widening. It's really about pavement marking and signage. As I mentioned earlier, we developed a toolbox. The toolbox specifies exactly how all these facilities should be planned, designed, and built. And a process, we've recommended a process for the town and potentially for the committee to be involved in whenever a project is initiated or project is being improved or recommended. How do you make those decisions? What process do you go through? So we've developed a process that really helps guide the town in, all right, what information do you collect? How do you engage with property owners? How do you make decisions? And if you figure out that corridor, you really can't provide improvements that are being requested, what do you do from there? Do you just stop, or do you take another approach? Do you go back and revisit your assumptions and start from scratch? Or do you maybe look at an alternative corridor? So we've provided that guidance within the toolbox, along with details for all the facilities I just walked you through, including sidewalks, improved intersection crossings for pedestrians, trailhead connections, and that sort of thing. And giving an example, each section, bike lanes, we've got visuals that help show what it looks like, the conditions where it should be used, how wide do you make these things under different conditions, et cetera. All right, demonstration projects. So we were asked to identify and develop recommendations for projects that the town could take on in the near future, low-cost projects that they could do in the next year or so. And we've identified 3 candidates. To date, we've actually have completed 1. And the first project, and this was really an idea that was brought forward by members of the Complete Streets Committee, was to do what's called a traffic garden, which is a place where children can learn how to ride their bikes following the rules of the road. So we developed a traffic garden at the school near a playground. And this was an empty paved space that had been at the former Claude Chester School, had been used as a part of the playground. You can see the old 4 square lines there. And in a Saturday, we really transformed it into a pretty fun space that was getting use right away. Nicole, do we have a picture of the final one anywhere here? Yeah, later, good. It came out fantastic. So that was our first project, but we also have some kind of more grown-up projects planned as well. So our demonstration projects here, Claude Chester School, we also have one recommended down at Depot Road and another one up here along River Road. And I'll show you what those look like. There it is. So in a day, we had a bunch of volunteers come out and transform it, and so now we have a facility where kids can practice yielding to pedestrians and stopping at stop signs and yielding in a roundabout, and we probably have some grown-ups in town that could practice how to use a roundabout there. And it was really a fun project, and it's good to have a few of these built into a project that is otherwise looking out several years for many of the implementation items. Other short-term measures that, as we get into the spring and summer, the town can entertain include at Depot Road, improving crosswalk conditions here. You can see we've got a 4-way stop, no crosswalks at all, and I'm sure a stop that plenty of people roll through. And so we've developed recommendations for providing marked crosswalks and choking that down with bump outs using traffic paint and traffic posts. And these are posts that are designed, you can hit them, it doesn't hurt your car, and the post doesn't get destroyed. And the same at, it's bind loss or bend loss, Mark? I ask you this every single time. Bend, thank you. I ask him every single time, and then I forget. This is a really wide open intersection. A lot of people actually walk and ride through here. It has a lot more pavement than it needs, so we've developed recommendations just to choke that down to make it a lot safer. So these are all proof of concepts, which show you, hey, with some minor improvements and without building things bigger, but really taking away some space, we can make it safer, more comfortable, and it'll function fine. And so we've developed plans for each of those. And then finally, another exciting extension of our work is working with the town on the Crosstown Greenway. The Crosstown Greenway is a route. For the most part, it's not like a new facility that has been built. It's a route that follows some existing facilities and goes on some roads, and you can walk on a sidewalk and ride the bike down the road and walk along existing trails and hike through trails through different open space properties, state open space, town, and private. And it's intended to carry you all the way through across town and connect to a regional system as well. And right now, there's a little bit of mapping of a route, but there really isn't any signage out there, informational signage, branding, wayfinding, or anything of that nature. So we've worked with the town to develop all of that. So we've developed a logo for it. It's the Groton Crosstown Greenway with several partner organizations that are part of this. And we're accommodating a lot of different types of users. People in wheelchairs, pedestrians, hikers, mountain bikers, and road cyclists. And the signage helps guide users in the appropriate direction of a facility or a trail that can accommodate them. And so by example, we would place signage. You could use existing utility poles, existing traffic signs like no parking signs, existing trail signs, or you could put in new poles as well. And we'd have wayfinding signage or directional signage that indicates, yes, you're on the route, and go this way. And here's an example. There's a range of signage out there right now for these multiple open spaces and some of the trails. And we're recommending unified or uniform welcome signage all along the route. So there would be consistent look, and that signage could still provide information about that particular open space. In this example, the Merritt Family Forest, but at the same time, it would be branded as part of the Crosstown Greenway route. And so we've developed a sign concept for that. We found a really nice example that the town liked, so something kind of more rustic and rural. And so we based it upon that. We developed specifications for a sign of that nature. And so this would be signs at the trailheads. And, sorry, a little interference here. And we've gone through from west to east the entire route. And this particular sheet, so we've got around 12 or 15 of these sheets. And in this example, we show South Road and Depot Road. And so the route would travel, if you're a bicyclist, you would just go down South Road, but you would know to travel down South Road to stay on the route. And if you're a bicyclist or you're a walker, you would use the sidewalk or walk in the road where a sidewalk isn't there. But here we have, in this example, the boardwalk. And so the signage would direct pedestrians to the boardwalk, but would direct bicyclists to stay on Route 1 and then go down Depot Road, where there you connect to the trolley trail and go further east. So in this example, we show, a dozen different locations where wayfinding signage could be provided and different types of signage pointing different types of users in the direction that they need to go. And so we've provided this for the entire route. We've also provided a complete list of the signage required, and some basic cost estimates. And the town has already, before, when they were doing the budgeting in December, had already put in requests to get this started. So our next steps in this process are to, as I mentioned earlier, we need to package up all this work. So we've done most of the work. We just need to put it into a document that really adequately represents all the work that's been done and the recommendations that we've made. We're also finalizing our cost estimates for the concept plan corridors, and we are going to present to Town Council on March 11th. And it'll be a very similar presentation as this, but at that point we'll have the draft document available. So with that being said, and I've been talking for a while, are there any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Did anybody ever consider putting a bike path down the middle of 95, in between?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, please, with the mic, repeat the question, because we have people online that will want to hear your question.
Did you consider putting a bike path in between the north and south lanes of 95?
All right, so let's talk about the challenges of an interstate. Okay, well, let's start with successes. The Gold Star Bridge is getting improved to widen the existing sidewalk into a wider facility for both bicyclists and pedestrians. And that is fairly monumental, okay, because it is not only is it I-95, it's a bridge structure, and it's one of the very few connections across the river. So that's incredibly important. However, on either end of that, you quickly separate from the highway, and you get on into local or state roadways. Interstates are limited access, and so a facility like that, there are 0 facilities of that nature that exist in Connecticut. They're limited access, they're only for vehicles, and and let's just set the challenges of putting something in the middle aside, where you only have so many access points where you can get to it. Even to consider a pathway along the edge, whether it's the south side or the north side, the DOT and federal highways are they won't accept that type of facility. If you look across the country, maybe you can find some examples of paths that have been co-located along highways, but they're usually separated by a good distance. In Fairfield County, the Merritt Parkway, several years ago, there was strong interest, and there probably still is, in developing a shared use pathway parallel to and within the right-of-way of the Merritt Parkway. And it being a parkway, it was argued that it's more suitable. It really was intended to be a parkway and not an interstate highway. And that's faced just tremendous opposition for all sorts of reasons. So for all of those reasons, we've maintained our focus away from I-95. Some of the challenges that I-95 presents are at the interchanges, safely crossing the ramps, particularly where you have on-ramps that are really diverging traffic that accelerates as it goes up the ramp. So we have challenges enough just working around the edges of it. And so no, we did not look for any corridors. We're looking really to Route 1 to provide that east-west connection across town. Okay? Yes, sir, and please do use the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll shout.
Here, I'll come over here. Yeah.
I'm looking at your picture that's up there now. If that route was open to bikes, it'd make it a lot safer. When you're coming on Route 1, coming from the south, you want to take a right on Depot Road to head down to the park system and the trolley system. And that intersection of Route 1 and Depot Road is really dangerous, because Route 1 has some width, but then you take the right and the Depot Road is so narrow, it's hazardous. If you could go on the bike path, which a lot of people are doing anyways, it would make that safer temporarily till you guys figured things out.
Okay, thanks for the comment and for the question. You want to add to that?
I have another question.
Okay, let me respond to that one, and we'll come to you, and please use that mic right there. So the question was about the Pequannock River Boardwalk, right? That's the name of it, right? And as you can see, it's fairly narrow, and I guess you could ride your bike on there. You know, it's possible to ride it on there. It's not great for pedestrians to be riding a bike on something this narrow. So it really, as it is, it currently stands, it's really best suited for pedestrians alone. The town does have a funded project that's moving into design to provide improved bicycle and pedestrian connections from down near the airport, up South Road, along Route 1, back down Depot Road to get over to the trolley trail. And I think that we've made recommendations for the types of facilities, but that project is going to go much further in design. So it's like, they're going to look at our recommendations and explore if they can make that happen as we've recommended it. And what we've recommended, for the most part, is on South and Depot Road is for bikes to use the road, because those are relatively low volume, but to improve the sidewalks for pedestrians. The challenge is up on Route 1, getting over from South to Depot, and we've recommended a side path on Route 1. So that's a segment, it's not a real long segment, quarter mile maybe, if that, but that would be a very costly segment. Improving that segment would cost as much as all the rest, probably. Fortunately, that is a project that is moving forward. Mark, do you want to provide any updates on the status other than it's moving towards design? It's funded project, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's moving towards design.
Yep. So that will very soon be explored in detail. Okay? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was looking at your slide there regarding the width of the roads, the one that said the roads were 11 feet, and you had a 3 feet buffer, and then you
Right.
had the bike path. Is there any type of regulatory or statutory requirement that says a bike path has to be so wide? So
Okay.
what does that do for us to put a bike path on the road with an 11-foot lane? How wide do we have to have the road to be, the entire load?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. We get into a lot of detail in the plan and in the toolbox. And the width of that bike facility really differs based upon the road conditions, how much volume, what the speeds are, the width of the buffer. I think what you're referring to is 215. We had an example of what we've recommended for 215. There happens to be, through a segment of it, fairly wide shoulders where there isn't a bike lane marked right now. And there's plenty of room there for a 5-foot wide bike lane. So a bike lane generally needs to be about the same width as a sidewalk. About a 5-foot wide bike lane, a 3-foot buffer, and that's just painted markings to help further separate bikes and traffic. And then an 11-foot travel lane. 11-foot travel lanes are DOT's standard minimum for any state roadway. Some towns and cities go down to 10 feet if the conditions are right, 10-foot travel lanes. But 11 is usually the minimum standard, and if you're on I-95, it's 12 feet for a traffic lane. So we ensure that whatever we're recommending, we can maintain that 11 feet in either direction. That's important for traffic operations. But it's also important that vehicles have enough room in their lane that they don't have to encroach into the bike lane. All right? So those widths vary, but generally speaking, traffic lane needs to be 11 feet wide, and a bike lane at minimum is 5 feet wide.
So then we're looking at road that has to be a minimum of 30 feet to put just a bike lane for a travel lane. A lot of the roads are not that wide. or
Correct.
Just
So
about that wide.
really, it's like 32 feet in most conditions, because you have two 11-foot lanes, so that's 22, and then 5 foot on either side, 32. And that's one of our challenges, is your existing roads just aren't that wide. So if you have a road that is, say, 30 feet wide, 29 feet wide, and the conditions at the shoulder are somewhat favorable, you know, it doesn't drop off suddenly to wetlands or marsh, or there isn't a steep incline, and there aren't going to be any real drainage challenges, and you have the right-of-way, which means the town or the state owns the property, then to do 2 or 3 foot widening, it certainly costs money, but it's a feasible type of project to get a bike lane in. But if you need to take an extra 8 or 10 feet, that's an incredibly costly and usually very technically challenging project, because you have very few areas of this town that are flat and straight. And that's the challenge along Route 1, which we're quickly able to remove a facility like buffered bike lanes, or what's called a separated bike lane or a cycle track, where you have part of the road that's dedicated just to bikes, and it has a curb or traffic posts that separate that out, only because it's really not technically feasible to widen Route 1 by 10 feet in almost any location, either because of the property impacts. Like, you'd imagine having to rebuild 100 driveways and negotiate property takings for 100, a couple hundred properties, or because of grades, climbing the hill with steep grades on either side, whether dropping off or going up. So we're trying to work within the edge of the roadway along Route 1 for those reasons.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So I want to say right up front, I totally agree with these folks about Depot Road and Route 1. I don't know, I wouldn't trust myself to be safe because there was a sign put up, or even a stripe on the road. So I think you got to think about that one a lot. I have a question about the shared path.
Yes, sir.
And so other places use strategies where pedestrian traffic uses the opposite sides as bike traffic. So if you're biking like a car on the right side, the pedestrian coming in the other direction is also coming on the right side.
Right.
So everybody sees everybody.
Correct.
That would be helpful for Pequannock, for that that more narrow walkway, bikeway. But other towns and other states like Rhode Island use this all the time. Is that what you're proposing?
No, one of the challenges with directional facilities is, first of all, it's just compliance. People are going to tend to want to walk and bike in the direction that's convenient to them. So there's a challenge with compliance. The next challenge is, because we don't have a lot of redundancy, which means you don't have opportunities for facilities on both sides of the streets of the road, it may technically, or the feasibility may be that you can only provide a side path, by example, on one side of the road, because you just don't have room on the other side, or there are too many conflicts on the other side. So whenever you have to choose a side, or you're limited to one side, it has to be bi-directional. The other challenge is just getting across. So if you can only go on one direction on this side and one direction on the other side, and you have a busy corridor, you can have challenges getting access, so you end up riding in the wrong direction on one side until you can cross over.
We're talking about two different things, I think.
Yeah, go ahead. You better explain.
So this
Yeah.
Pequannock here,
Yes.
traffic goes both ways on that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's supposed to be pedestrian,
Right,
I understand.
right.
But if there's a bike, and if whichever direction you're riding, assume that's like a two-way road.
Yeah.
If you're staying always to the right side.
Oh, just splitting it. Just
Well, you
putting
don't have
like
to-
a center line.
Yeah. And I mean, in Rhode Island, it seems
Yeah.
to work really well. I actually think it's better than what they
Yeah.
do in Massachusetts, where you have to hear people say,
Okay.
on your
on your
left,
left, on your
on your left.
The challenge here is this thing just isn't wide enough. I think it's maybe 6 feet wide. It's just not wide enough, right? If you were to put a line down the center, you'd get, people would end up walking on the line. because there's really not room to stay to your side, and it's particularly if you're in a wheelchair. So that's the real challenge here. So the pathway you do have in town that along Route 12 that connects up to the subbase does have pavement marking down the center to separate the directions of travel. And typically, you apply those on a facility where you have higher use. When you have a facility that's very low use, you don't have a lot of conflict because there's low use, so you don't have a need to separate people out. As you get higher use, it's more important to provide that stripe down the middle. So we have not identified in the pathways we've recommended which ones should or should not have a stripe. Very often what happens is you install the facility, you give it a try for a year, and you see if there are complaints about, people aren't giving me enough space, whether it's a bicyclist or people on the other side. And then if there's real demand, then you can go in and stripe it. Or if you know a section is going to have very high usage, you would stripe it when it's built. Okay. And sorry if I misunderstood your comment. Yep. Yes, sir.
Are we on? Yeah.
Yep.
For a lot of the best solutions for better pedestrian and bicycle safety at intersections, very often a big part of it is changing the configuration of the actual road, not just adding something for the bicycles. Especially in our area of downtown, where we actually have plenty of room, usually have plenty of room in the right-of-way to do some things. Does your plan at least talk to those things to try to get that as part of it? Because it's hard to get the state to dig up a road unless they are compelled to.
It does, in that we provide typical recommendations. So for the Route 1 corridor, we do. For every intersection, we identify the exact type of improvements that are needed to safely cross that intersection. And for the corridors that we've developed the concept plans for, because we've gotten into that level of detail. For all of the rest of the network across the town, where we really haven't gone intersection by intersection, we developed typical recommendations. So by example, one of the downsides of using a side path for a bicyclist is that you really become a pedestrian in many ways. So as a bicyclist riding on a pathway that is not in the road, at intersections, you need to stop and you need to follow the traffic control of that intersection. So if it's a signalized light, you only cross with the pedestrian signal. Now, that requires pedestrian signals to be installed at all those intersections, including signal heads and push buttons, and a dedicated pedestrian phase, of which you will not find many of along Route 1. In some cases, you're lucky if you can push a button to get a green light to cross with traffic. So the downside of a side path for a bicyclist, or for a more experienced bicyclist, is that there's more delay, because at each intersection you have to behave like a pedestrian. And you could ride, you don't have to walk your bike across, but you have to wait for a pedestrian signal, or you have to stop and look and make sure it's clear and continue. The advantage of being in a road, and we have a lot of facilities that are recommended in the road, and to your point, those intersections need special treatment. You can create a bike pocket or a bike box where bikes can safely wait for a light. The advantage of that is the bike can behave more like traffic and cross with a green light and doesn't have to slow down for a green light. And really, the signals generally favor traffic, so there's less delay for a bicyclist. And so that's the advantage of that type of facility. And even that requires intersections may need to be modified in some way to carry the bike lane all the way to the intersection, unlike many examples of what we see in the state where the bike lane quits a couple hundred feet before the intersection, and it's just good luck, hope everything goes well, right? Our toolbox identifies exactly how to handle all types of intersections for different types of facilities and under different conditions. Okay. All right? Thanks, Mark. Any other comments or questions? Yes, sir.
In 2017, they did a study on this, and I presume you weren't given any. Oh, yeah, let me grab that. 2017, John Reiner did a study, or had a study done, which cost us $25,000, of course, and nothing was done. There was a meeting, and there was quite a bit of protest in the way it was done. And, you know, everything that you've done is great, great presentation, but there's so many factors that you're trying to look at, like in the perfect world. If you sit down on Depot Road and you watch the people that make that right-hand turn on red, it's 50% of the people.
Right.
50%, all right? Why can't there be a spot where you have to get off your bike and walk it for a half mile? These bikers are all in great shape. All down that Route 1 there, they could
Yep.
get off the bike and
Yep.
walk. And the only safe way, and I've said this way back in 17, is to get down South Road into Bluff Point, is to revisit at a bridge maybe across that 50 or 75-foot span down by where the town beach was.
Right.
And it'll be in a tremendous cost, but at what cost are we going to give a life? And besides the bikers, how about the person that hits the guy on the bike?
Of course.
And then whose fault is it? And South Road is just, and, you know, I live there, and I've lived there since 78. You say, well, traffic speed. That traffic speed on South Road ain't posted speed limit, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
It's way above that. And if you look at the whole town overall, I don't see that many bikers out there. I'd say it's more important for the guy in the wheelchair, because I've seen them struggle to get across
Yeah.
the intersection, and they don't have a choice.
Right.
So I guess my feeling is there's plenty of recreational spots in this town. You don't know how much the grant money is gonna come in anymore, because there is no money. And the other factors, I can't believe that they didn't say, well, here, this is what happened in 2017, and move from there. And I see that you've done a good presentation, but for how much of the public are we doing this for? And at what expense to the town and the safety of everybody? I mean, it's
Yeah.
great if you can get a safe bike lane, but maybe there's spots where them bikers should be walking.
Right.
And that's one spot in front of Midway Pizza there and on Route 1 in Johnson's Hardware. The houses and the businesses are 5 or 8 feet from the road.
Right.
So if you want them off there, you're gonna probably have to build that bridge or do something like that. And at what cost? Do we do all of this for, did you survey how many bikers are out there? Did you go out and,
Yeah.
do you have know how many bikers went down South Road on a daily basis?
Yeah.
It's not that many, I don't think.
You're
And-
absolutely right.
And I rode, you know, when I was younger, I rode the bike all the time, and I rode on the sidewalk on South Road, and it's not that safe.
Yeah.
But I think, how much money do we spend to get that few percentage of people that want to ride the bike there? There's plenty there, and maybe they'd have to walk on Route 1 in some parts.
Yep.
And the other thing is, everybody today that isn't on a bike is on a cell phone. And the bikers all got plugs in their ears. When we were a kid, you drive down the road, you'd hear the car coming, you'd get out of the way. But nobody's paying attention.
Yeah.
So I think your presentation's good, but I think when you figure what it costs to get these bikers around town for the few people that you're doing it for, I mean, if 6 people on South Road get a horse, they say, we want to go to Bluff Point to ride, are you going to put a horse track in for the horses to walk down? I mean, at some point, you got to justify your spending. And I don't think you're going to get a lot of grant money and stuff coming in. At least if the administration and the government stays the way it is now, that could be, you know, money could be a huge problem. And grant money ain't free money, it's taxpayer money. So I think you've got to weigh all of them issues a little more than just making the safe bike path and for how many. I think you've got to find other ways to do it, like they might have to walk some. You know, I don't know that they're riding, maybe one or two people do I see riding their bikes down South Road to work. And there's just a lot more to weigh that it's easy to say, well, we can do this, but it's really not easy and it's not safe. And if you want to put bike lines in on South Road, you go ahead and do it. But I'm telling you, a lot of people are elderly. They're backing out of the driveway because they're narrow. There's no
Right.
place to turn around when they pull in. The houses are 20 feet, 30 feet off the road. So as they back out, if there's another car parked, and you have the same problem on Depot Road because they park
Yeah, that's very
all
similar.
up the side
Yeah.
of the road, and you go to pull out of one of like Quincy Court, because I've got a house there, and you can't see the cars coming
Yeah.
unless you're in a truck or over the top. So there's a lot more to look at, and I would personally like to see some of the data on how many bikes we're talking about to create and spend all this money, you know?
Okay. There was a lot there and some very.
I don't expect you to answer
Yeah,
them now.
that's
I'm
okay.
making some points.
Let me
and-
just try to respond to it. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, there is a project that will be moving forward, taking a close look at both South Road and Depot Road in far more detail than we were able to get into. One of the reasons why we didn't select those roads and those connections for concept development for the design work like we did Route 1 is because there is a funded design project that we'll be taking a closer look. And it will afford the design team an opportunity to engage with residents such as yourself to really work out some of the challenges in what is possible, if anything, along that South Road and Depot Road. With respect to, who are we doing this for? Nobody bicycles in town. That's really the conversation I have in every community I go to. We know that bicycling rates are very low in Connecticut compared to certain places in Colorado or West Coast, wherever it may be, or certain college towns. But there's still a demand. And so we want to try to figure out a way to safely accommodate. And this isn't just about bicyclists. Half of our improvements are really about walking, pedestrians, to accommodate both users in a safe and fair way, in a way that is not adversely impactful to property owners such as yourself, that doesn't create additional safety hazards, that doesn't adversely impact your property. And so that's a huge balance we're trying to achieve. This is, to some extent, and I don't want to overstate this is a bit of a chicken and egg thing. Of course you don't have people bicycling. You don't have a lot of places for them to bicycle. However, if we were to build out this network overnight, I don't want to pretend like half the people in town are going to be on bikes tomorrow. Yes, you would see more people bicycling, and maybe enough that you would feel that this was a reasonable investment because it's really generated a lot of activity, encouraged it, and it's making it possible for people to get around town, whether recreationally, just to get exercise or have fun, but also to make trips that they need to make. And not everyone has a car or a driver's license. Some people have to walk or bicycle as a means of transportation. And those are the people we're also trying to accommodate. And it does need to be balanced against the cost to the taxpayer, to the town, to the state, to the federal government, and the benefit that's being produced. Our most heavily subsidized infrastructure that costs the most isn't sidewalks and bike lanes, right? It's state highways. It's the interstate highway and the state highway and bridges and that sort of thing. It provides a tremendous amount of value, but it also costs a lot. In order for us to understand what that cost is and whether or not it's worth it, we have to go through a process like this and figure out, okay, what type of facility is feasible to provide, is responsible to provide, what are the costs of that, what are some of the potential impacts, and is this something we really want to pursue? Is this a project that we want to bring to the town, that we want to try to get funding for, that we want to pursue a grant for, that we want to design or build? And we can't get to that point unless we go through this process. Now, it very well may be that the result of this plan is that a lot of big ideas that people were really hoping could come to fruition, we identify the fact that they're too costly, or what you really need to, what people are hoping they could build won't work. And what you really need to build is something very different, and it has a whole other set of impacts and will cost a lot. And in that process, it may be that some of these ideas, some of these corridors, really aren't pursued because the value isn't there. But even if we only build out, are able to fund and build out 20% of the network that we presented, that's 20% more areas that people can walk and bike, and that will provide value. So this is the first step in the process. We're not committing the town to build all of this. We're not committing the taxpayer to pay for it. By recommending that there's a connection that goes up Depot Road, over Route 1, down south, and connects to the trolley trail, we're not committing the residents of Depot Road or South Road to having a facility built there. What we're saying is this needs to be explored. Here are the types of recommendations that could work. This is the cost, and these are some of the challenges. And this is the priority of it.
No, I understand all of that, and I don't know whose job it is to go after the funding if there is federal funds. And I'm not against the people on the bikes or the people in, like I said, the people in the wheelchairs have the toughest time of it all. They can hardly get across the street. I get a guy from Pequannock Bridge every day. He's walking with his wife in her wheelchair up to the shopping center and back. But there's just so many things. Now, you talked about paving the roads. The state just repaved that road in front of the airport last year. There was no sidewalks put in or nothing there. Nothing was done then, and that's a state road.
Right.
So they're not jumping on the idea to do it as well, because everybody's on the cost end of the deal. So
Okay.
I like exploring options like you got to get off the bike, that's a walkway. And the other thing, you know, that Pequannock Bridge walking area, I have seen that so overgrown with weeds that you can't even walk down it at times. And, you know, that was a federally funded project. And I think the little thing that they had at the beginning of it, it was all federally funded. And then the town has to take care of it after that. You know, all these things, the government's going to help you. They'll help you hire a firefighter pay for his salary for 2 years. Then it rolls into the town's responsibility.
And that's
So
a much
all
bigger
of this-
discussion.
Yeah, it's a there's long-term projects and problems that always get forgotten.
All right, and then this person here has been patiently waiting, yes.
Hi. I serve on the Complete Streets Committee along with Mr. Kent, Mr. Olson, Ms. Hendrickson, and Ms. Barry. And I just want to clarify what the purpose of this presentation and what the purpose of all of this is. This was already paid for by your tax dollars, and it's to provide a set of templates, if you will, right, for potential projects. And what we did on the committee is we said, this will give us the most bang for our buck if we look at this type of situation, all these different templates. And this firm that are experts in this field have created templates for us. And what's going to happen is they're going to hand this to the town council, whoever that may be. And the town council then, as opportunity arises, can say, hey, we have a template. There's a grant out there. Let's go for that grant for this particular segment of town. And then the town council will decide, the RTM will decide what is appropriate. But in order to be able to go after that grant money, you have to be ready to go. And this set of templates, if you will put the town in a better position so that when money does become available, we can go after it. And no one is saying this is going to be built out completely all at once. That's near impossible. But to be ready to pursue opportunities to improve the town is something that I think we should all be happy about. We have plans. They're going to be available for the people that you elect to decide what to do with, right? They may decide they don't want to touch any of this for a while, but this will be there, and we will have the knowledge of what is necessary, how much it's going to cost, what's feasible, and then the people you elect can make informed decisions. And I think that's the best thing we can do at this point, is to present this to the council, and they will have this, use the term toolbox, they'll have this toolbox for when a grant arises. So I'm pleased with the product we have, and I hope the council is receptive to it. And I hope the RTM gets to see the same presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Yes, sir. Back here.
Thank you. Does the feds of the state of the town require that a bike lane sign be alongside every charrette?
No, well, so there's no minimum distance between signs. So there's no minimum requirement. You can put the signs as close as you like. However, you don't have to put them too close, and we provide guidance on distance between bike lane signs or any other type of signage. And it varies depending on the condition. Pavement markings are used more frequently, typically, than signs. Signs cost more, it's a little more visual clutter. Pavement markings really should establish the direction for the facility, and signs are just a reminder that there's to motorists and to some extent bicyclists, that there's a facility there. So they tend to be used less frequently than pavement markings.
215 from Route 1 to South Elm Street. You mentioned how nice it was to have the wide shoulder. If you continue there on the way to Mystic, you've got a foot, maybe 2 feet between the line for the roadway and the raised sidewalk.
Yeah.
Would you recommend that the state at some time remove all the raised sidewalks and
No.
just put a flat shoulder going across?
No. There are a couple of important considerations. One is this plan is designed to improve conditions for both bicyclists and pedestrians. So we don't want to improve a bicyclist facility at the expense of pedestrians. So that's the first. Second, to the extent possible, we're trying to work within the infrastructure that we have and not widen roadways to accommodate facilities. In some cases, you do for some of what's planned, but we try to keep that to a minimum. The recommendation along that segment is where we run out of room for the bike lane on the shoulder is to reintroduce them into the roadway to share the road with vehicles. Not all bicyclists will feel comfortable sharing a road with vehicles, and many of them will either choose to not ride on that segment or, as this gentleman suggested, walk their bikes, which we do see a lot of. Bicyclists will walk segments that aren't comfortable for riding. So in that particular instance, no, we would not recommend removing the sidewalk in order to widen the roadway to continue a bike lane. Okay. It's our goal to accommodate all types. Not all bicyclists are the same, and we have a range of experience, technical capabilities, confidence, comfort levels with traffic and hills and that sort of thing. Our goal is to accommodate all users, whether it's a child, or a senior citizen, someone who's newer to bicycling, someone who's more competent. But we can't always accommodate all users on every road. But the network, we're trying to plan a network that can accommodate all users across the town. But we can't always do that on every road. Some roads, it really will have to be a more competent cyclist is the only type of cyclist that we can accommodate on the road, unless they would prefer to walk their bike on a sidewalk, or even sometimes ride on a sidewalk for that matter. Okay.
And again, I don't have anything against the plan and being ready. I just think that we need, and I guess you're going to do that, now that the more I listen here, to find areas that we spend a reasonable amount of money to keep the people safe. And
Yeah.
if they gotta walk the bikes through there, or, you know, you can't get under that bridge on South Road. It's,
Yeah, I understand it.
so I'm not against it.
Yeah.
But it irks me a little that they did this, spent 25 grand in 2017 and didn't hand you the study to start, and maybe you wouldn't have used any of it. I think, but I think it was like 25
Mm-hmm. We-
grand to the tax.
We have reviewed a range of plans, studies, and reports, and that's a lot of work that was done by my team. I haven't seen everything, so we probably have been provided it and reviewed it, and I can't speak to detail because I can't
Yeah, no,
visualize
that's
it right
fine.
now. Okay,
That's fine. I just
all right.
kind of like to watch the money a little bit and find the happy medium.
And you said it yourself, that's exactly what we're doing, is we're identifying, because we're associating costs with this and priority levels, we're identifying projects that will provide the most value, meaning, you know, it can happen at the lowest cost with the,
Yeah,
and in the near term.
I understand
then,
completely.
And then we can leave it to the town and town council and other decision makers make decisions about where to place those investments. Okay? Yes, sir.
Just one quick question. Do you think that bike boxes at intersections contribute to the safety of both the bicyclist and the motorist? And what's your recommendation? It's a pretty cheap way to
It is.
get a safety factor in, isn't it?
It is, the application of those is very limited. The manual for uniform traffic control devices, which is something traffic engineers used, was updated last year, or it might have been 2023, to provide additional guidance on exactly how those can be used and designed. And it's very strict in terms of the conditions it can be used on. By example, you can't put a bike box in front of a right turn lane unless you have no turn on red. So that's challenging for a lot of traffic engineers, particularly an intersection that's already failing or deficient level of service. In addition to that, if you have a bike box, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but I just want to impress you that there are challenges. If you have a bike box that spans more than one lane, so that as a bicyclist you can maybe go into it and cross over a couple lanes and get positioned for a left turn, you're required to have pedestrian crossing signal head with a countdown that goes, 19, 18, 17. So the bicyclist knows how much time they have to get over there and get positioned so they don't get stuck while the light turns green. So we've provided all the guidance on exactly where you can use those, how you can use those, and in some cases they are a very good solution because they give bicyclists a place to wait at a traffic light away from cars and out of the mix where they're visible. And there are also other things called left turn boxes that you put on the other side of the intersection. We've provided guidance on all of those techniques. So I think, yes, for some of the, along Route 1, some of the other facilities where we've recommended bike lanes and other facilities, bike pockets, bike boxes will help, but there are a lot of, it's not just paint on the road, there are a lot of other things that need to happen. Regulatory, where there's no right turn on red, improving the signals at the intersection. So it can be kind of complicated, but we provided all of that guidance in the toolbox.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Well, you folks have been fantastic. I appreciate all the comments and questions. They're all absolutely relevant to our work and help us understand your needs as a community, your concerns a lot better. Is that stretching out or a hand? Yeah, go ahead.
Could you just speak a little bit, just for everybody to kind of like have a plan that happened, that could give them an example of what happened in New Britain and kind of what you went
Okay. So myself and Phil Barlow, who's a landscape architect in our office, who's actually retiring in a couple of weeks. I don't know if you knew that. We developed, working with Mark Moriarty, New Britain's Public Works Director and Town Engineer, we developed New Britain's bike plan. So we identified, much like we did here, in far less detail actually, it was really very simple. We developed their bike plan, and Mark he had a lot of proponents in town. He was very successful in getting funding, and they built out miles and miles of bike network, bike lanes and pathways and shared roadways, and have also improved sidewalks and pedestrian crossings. We did the City of Hartford's bike plan. It's a project I worked on 10 years ago now, and we have since then been working with the city to design and plan individual improvements according to the master plan. And in some case, the recommendation, what we're actually designing and building, has changed a little bit, because as we got to work with the community, we better understood their needs. We had financial constraints. Maybe the traffic engineer took a look at things, or we're working with other storm drainage concerns. We've been working consistently over the past 10 years with the City of Hartford to build out bicycle infrastructure across the city. City had maybe a couple miles when I started 10 years ago, and they probably have more than 20 miles now. So these projects have been very successful in resulting in real projects being built. And in many of the communities we worked with consistently year after year through a lot of different funding sources, and yes, some grant programs do dry up, but then money appears in other places, and sometimes if you have a big development project and get the developer to foot part of the bill for what's in front of their property, you can roll it into other types of improvements and maintenance. These things tend not to happen if you don't have a good plan in place. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, you folks have been great. Thanks for carving out some time on a winter night. Good night, and we'll make sure we get notice once the draft of the plan is available on the town website. We'll make it as visible as it is, so just check in.